Tyler, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on here today.
Thank you, Dr. Cabral. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking with you today.
Now, am I officially allowed to call you Dr. Gene yet? That is your last name, right?
It is Gene, yes. I'm going to be wrapping up school in about 9 months, so almost there. I feel like I'm on my victory lap right now.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll definitely want to get into that as well, because the last year of Naturopathic Medical School is obviously a little bit different than what you've been doing the past few years. But I would love to really kind of let people into your world, which I think is unique and really is just, I just feel that social media and online has changed the game for a lot of people now studying to be naturopathic doctors, because they've already learned so much. There's so much education that the world needs, and you're already in a teaching-based position. So you didn't wait to finish school. You've actually now been teaching this online for quite a number of years. I remember finding your specific account probably 2 years ago. And I would love to talk about kind of the journey through a vegan-based meal plan to where you're at today, and seeing what works for your bio-individuality. But you being in your 4th year of medical school, Naturopathic Medical School, graduating, like you said, in 9 months to become a naturopathic doctor, how do you describe it, what it is you're doing right now? Because you're not just going to school, you're also teaching. So where does that leave you in terms of your online personality and your work?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's opened up so many opportunities and doors for me, and it's allowed me to come from this place of creativity, which I think is so important. And oftentimes when you're going through any schooling system, it can feel like it's stripping you of your creative capacity. And I think that's something that has always been important to me. And something that I really resonate with and am passionate about is being a teacher and educating others on how they can take self-responsibility for their health. And it's this empowerment and education piece on how do we cultivate health? And so I had my own health struggles growing up. I was a student athlete. I swam Division I at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And my whole journey to health really came and started around nutrition. And it was through that process that I learned, that there's so much more to health than the absence of a diagnosable disease. And it has propelled me on this journey to, yes, pursue a degree in naturopathy and become a doctor. But, starting the social media account that I did in 2016 during my journey as a vegan foodie, and just this search on what is the best diet for everyone. And along that journey, finding out that there really is no one size fits all approach. And, it's been really humbling to me. And I've learned a lot through my experience. And, as I've been going through school, being able to share what I've been learning and helping to educate and empower other people on, again, how to cultivate health. I'm less interested in, it is important, there's a time and place for it, but I'm less interested in how do we treat disease when it's already manifested, as opposed to how can we prevent it, right? And how do we actually cultivate health on a daily basis? And you think about a lot of these foundational pillars to health that I think so many people need help with, and they need guidance, they need coaches, they need accountability. And I see my role on social media and kind of what I've been able to develop and build with my platform is that bridge in between doctor's visits and this realization, even starting to see patients now in my rotational years, is that true healing doesn't happen in the doctor's office. It's what occurs between visits. And I think that's where I really see my role and this ability to, educate people, hold people accountable, and give them the resources that they're looking for so that they can make, significant steps forward in their health journey, and to realizing, what's true for them. You brought up the term bio-individuality, and I full-heartedly believe in that term. And, just because it works for one person doesn't mean it works for another person. And, I love the creative aspect that social media brings. I love the community aspect, and how we were able to connect, and so many other like-minded individuals have been able to connect through social media. And I really believe we're creating this movement on not only, how we view health in this country, but how we practice medicine as a whole.
Without a doubt. And I'd love to get into a little later in the show how you best believe we are able to get people into preventative medicine when most people will not take action until that rain barrel is overflowed or the disease manifestation has been diagnosed. Because a lot of times you're like, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm busy today. I'll do it tomorrow. And they want to live vicariously through sometimes other people. So how do we get them to take action? So I look forward to having that discussion as well. But I'm really interested, when you were a Division I swimmer, And swimmers are amazing athletes. And they also consume massive amounts of calories because you're burning so much in the pool. I mean, I remember following Michael Phelps. I swam all the way until my sophomore year of high school. And then I don't necessarily have that swimmer's body, that's for sure. And there is something to genetics. You know, I know that you're over 6 feet. I'm 5'8". My arms are not going to be as long, my legs. But no matter what, everyone can kind of push their genetics to that furthest limit. And that's what I always like to talk about. It's like, yes, your genetics matter, but you can get so much more out of them than you thought that you could. But I always find swimmers fascinating because, well, one, their sport is in the water, right? And so then there's all these different things that they need to deal with, but they're always looking for that edge, right? And we're talking about fractions of a second between first and second place, or Olympics and not going to the Olympics. So tell me, when you were doing Division I, were you following a specific diet plan, supplement plan? Like, were you doing a lot of these things, or were you just like most swimmers eating a whole large pizza a day and everything else that you could get your hands on?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, because at the time when I was an athlete and kind of the beginning of my collegiate career and taking things more seriously at the Division I level, I was really just focused on the caloric density of the meals that I was eating. And that's what we were told. We had to be able to fuel, the metabolic demand that we were putting our body through with 20 plus hours of training each week. And a lot of that was very catabolic based training. You think about the endurance and aerobic nature of swimming, in addition to we did a lot of stationary cycling, and we also did a lot of weightlifting too. I was a sprinter too. So, even more important was that aspect of recovery. And you always hear about recovery and how recovery is this, just as important as the work you're putting day in and day out in the pool or in the weight room. And it was something that was just kind of like, oh yeah, like I'm going to try to sleep more and, eat more whole foods, or making sure that I'm getting in enough nutrients. But, at the time I was eating a standard American diet, and, I thought, I didn't really like vegetables. I didn't like the taste of them. I would say the only vegetables in my diet at the time were spinach. That was I thought I was doing a service to myself, and I wasn't eating like iceberg lettuce. And I was like, spinach is more nutrient dense. And I just coupled that with ranch dressing. And then sweet potatoes and potatoes in the form of French fries. Those were my main vegetables that I ate. Otherwise, I was pretty much, I was a steak and potatoes type person. I had a huge sweet tooth. And, some of my teammates used to joke and call me Protein Gene, because I'd be slamming down, 100 to 150, grams of mass weight gainer shakes a day. And, I was aware that nutrition was an important role, but I just hadn't fully kind of bought into it. And it wasn't until my sophomore year of college that I had a friend recommend the China study to me. And this is a book by Dr. Campbell, and really the book promotes, I would say more a vegan agenda. And it was for the first time in my life that I had really opened my mind to, I would say, curiosity that, is a vegan diet best for everyone? What is the best diet for everyone? And, it did challenge me to actually make some dietary changes, with the hope that, by making these nutritional changes, that I would improve my athletic performance and my ability to recover on a day-to-day basis. So I was looking for the nutritional edge for athletic superiority, really. And that is what led me into this journey that I have been on into where I am today. And after implementing a vegan lifestyle for about 18 months, ultimately finding that it was incompatible with my body. And I will say that I felt really great for the first 12 to 13 months that I was on it. But ultimately, my body gave out on me. Like, my body was I was overtrained, and I had lost about 13 pounds. And for somebody that is doing so much aerobic-based training, and I'm a very lean guy, I got down to 163 pounds, and I really didn't have any more weight to lose. And so I think a lot of people, they equate like weight loss to health. And I think, our body has this optimal weight for all of us in terms of this homeostatic set point. And for me, I wasn't really listening to my bodily cues, and I was letting other people and other experts in the literature, dictate what was best for me, as opposed to listening and saying, how is my body actually responding? I was getting chronically sick. I had recurrent canker sores that I was getting, poor wound healing. And I just had really low energy. And again, more of this catabolic picture where my body was breaking down. I couldn't build up muscle. And I was swimming times my senior year of college that I was swimming in high school. So I was really discouraged, and I knew I had to do something different. And it was with resistance that I started opening myself up to, maybe there is another way. And, if I start to incorporate some animal-based products, that will help me put on some more muscle mass and stop this, wear and tear on my body and hopefully give me some reprieve. And so it was a long journey, and I learned a lot from it. I'll say that. And I think ultimately what I took away from that experience is that, again, there is no one diet for everyone. I think there is wisdom in listening what is right for you and biochemical individuality. And just because something may be, validated or elucidated in the literature that it is beneficial for X individual doesn't mean it's going to be right for you. But I think at the same time too, it showed me not to be afraid to try something different, and not to be afraid to fail. And because ultimately I found out from that experience by putting myself out there and trying that it's not right for me, and that I feel better with this more balanced approach. Maybe it's more of a plant-centric diet, but it's not 100%, plant exclusive. And I think from that too, it encouraged me to eat a lot more wholesome, nutrient-dense foods, fruits and vegetables, which I think are really the basis when it comes to what are the pillars for, dietary necessities for all humans. It's a foundation on whole, real, unadulterated foods with a lot of color and celebrates plant diversity.
Yeah. And I think, you bring up some really good points there, because I know myself too, when I started studying nutrition around 17, 18 years old, everything was absolutes. So meaning like whatever I was studying, that was the next best thing. And then I would study that. Okay, that's the next best thing. And, you're supposed to go through some of that. That's what kind of your late teens, early 20s in college, it's always just like, oh, I found the answer. Oh, I found the answer. And then there's just a little bit of self-experimentation, a little bit maturity. And you're like, well, maybe there's multiple ways to do this, but we're going to talk about foundations because there are always foundations. But I see this happening in our field, and that is medical doctors. And I'm sure you have a lot of friends who are medical doctors. I have a lot of friends and colleagues. Some of my really good closest friends are medical doctors. And the problem is when they venture into natural health, all of a sudden they find out about the carnivore diet or the keto diet. They haven't done their early 20s experimentation. So now all of a sudden they do the carnivore diet and they're shredded, right? They're lean. They can see their abs for the first time. Oh, and all of a sudden I have less joint pain. Well, now this is the diet that everyone should be following. The problem is they're a medical doctor. And as a medical doctor, if you say this, people are going to say, oh, well, this person's a medical doctor, then that's what I should be doing. And that's where I really think we have to be careful as health practitioners. I'm always self-experimenting, and I think that that's really positive for people, but I can't say and teach, oh, this is the right thing to do for everyone. And that's, I think, what we have. A lot of what's wrong in the natural health industry is saying, use this, use that, and it's exclusive. It's almost like workouts used to be. It's CrossFit or nothing, right? And it's like this type of workout or nothing. And oh, there's no place for doing some cardio. There's no place. And again, I was a part of that for sure. So it's interesting to see you've already arrived there. You already have gone through yourself of experimentation and understand that, for your body type. And certainly for my body type. And again, like I was vegan 3 different times, 6+ months at a time, trying to make it work for me, because on a spiritual path, I wanted it to work. And people say, well, you're not doing it right. And trust me, I was doing it right. And I'm my day is 90+% plant-based, even more than that. But and Ayurveda says this, like I'm more of a catabolic nature. You can be more of a catabolic nature. And especially with our activity levels, when you look at the kapha body type, the endomorph body type, they're naturally anabolic. So they actually do much better. And I see vegans online promoting a vegan diet for everyone. And I'm like, yeah, but you're super lean because you were a kapha body type and you are a kapha body type. So it works better for you. So I think it's amazing that you're promoting that and also not judging people who want to be vegan. And then they have to go through their path as well. And maybe they'll always be vegan. And that's fantastic too. It's both of our jobs to support them to be the healthiest vegan they can be.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring in the Ayurvedic aspect too. And, I've done some Ayurvedic pulse testing and I'm a Pitta Vata, and just the Vata body type in general is more catabolic in nature. So, you're combining that with, a diet that is higher in carbohydrates, lower in protein, and you're not stimulating a lot of these anabolic pathways as much as if you were to be eating animal-based tissue or animal-based products that are going to, again, be more anabolic. So, it's listening to your body, how does it respond, and just realizing like we're all individuals. And also, as you said, just realizing that there are certain individuals that absolutely thrive on a vegan diet. And so, as opposed to saying there's one size fits all, which is, I think, where we get in trouble, or just kind of like, blanket medicine and, one size fits all, being curious, open to curiosity as to why does this work for everyone, and realize that we're all unique. And then, yes, there are, genetic predispositions that make somebody maybe better equipped to a certain dietary lifestyle. And then for other people, that maybe it makes it incompatible for them. So, I think honoring that too, looking at how well you're able to digest food, all these different lifestyle factors, and just what does your day-to-day look like? Are you, a very stressed, gung-ho entrepreneur, CEO type person, or are you more of a yogi that is, kind of, more relaxed, living on the beach and living more of this laid back lifestyle? I think there's so many important aspects to that, but ultimately, I always tell people this, they're like, should I try this? Should I not? I was like, ultimately, you're going to learn through self-experimentation. And so I encourage people, even though I didn't have the best experience or found out that, veganism wasn't the best for me, I encourage people, if you want to try it, go for it. I think you're going to learn a lot from it.
That and, whatever is working for you now, we're not static beings, may not work for you 12 months from, just like you started. So I know many people, they go on a completely plant-based diet, vegan diet, and they do feel great. And the reason is they had poor digestion, they have low stomach acid, like many different reasons why, and they feel much better right now, right? So they're eating predominantly water-based foods, and now their body's more hydrated, and they're also might be more on a spiritual path. They're doing more meditation. They're doing other things that go along with the specific lifestyle. So the problem is, again, this sets into more of a catabolic nature. And if you're someone, and you absolutely are a Pitta-Vata, so for you, you have most likely strong digestion, at least your natural constitution would. So if you're trying to get the protein requirement that your body requires, especially as an athletic collegiate swimmer, I mean, it's going to be challenging. Can you get 100 plus grams of protein a day from a vegan-based diet? Absolutely. Is it as filling and heavy and thermogenic as animal or fish or egg? It's just not. And again, like that is where Ayurveda and other things teach us these specific things. But what I learned too, and especially since how I approached it, is that I'm much more responsible with how I choose to eat animal-based products now. So I eat meat as little as my body needs. So that's how I try to do it for me. And when I do, sure, it's grass-fed, grass-finished, is pasture-raised eggs and chicken. It's those types of things. And again, as much as my body needs, but not necessarily more, and not purchasing from the local, factory farm that is treating these animals inhumanely. And I've learned a lot about that over the past few years, especially with trying to be as responsible and sustainable as possible. And I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah, I think there was a term that I heard, maybe it was Michael Pollan, but it's conscious omnivore. And I really agree with that thought process, and just, ultimately listening to my body, supporting people that are doing it right. Recently been getting more into looking into regenerative agriculture and the impacts on climate change, and, better for the animals, better for our climate, better for you and your health. And just being more in touch with the food that we're consuming. And again, just being more intentional with being informed shoppers and consumers. I think because of the way that we are so removed from our food, and, for most of us from a day to day, we don't either like to cook or we're removed from the foods that we're consuming. And a lot of that is, we're eating out of convenience, packaged processed foods, we're frequenting restaurants or fast food. We're out of touch with that. And so I think, one of the most important things that I'm always sharing with my audience is, how can you get back into the kitchen and start to build on those culinary skills so that you can feel more empowered into what you're putting into your body? Because I think ultimately it gives you that autonomy to know what you're putting in your body and feeling good about that, because so many people may not be aware of how certain foods are impacting them until maybe they've removed some of those foods for a period of time, or done some type of elimination diet, or done some type of diet journal, and then be like, wow, I cut out a couple of these different foods and I feel significantly better. My rashes improved, my brain fog improved, my digestion improved. My anxiety and some of these, things that we talk about in terms of mental health disorders, intimately related to our gut health, as well as, a lot of the foods that we're eating and digestion and metabolism, starting to become more aware of these things I always kind of call it as a superpower, this self-awareness and how, different environmental factors in the foods that we're eating are impacting us on a day-to-day basis. And so I really challenge people to get back in the kitchen, try to have fun with it, try to focus on eating more wholesome, nutrient-dense foods, and not getting caught up in all the dogmatic diets, because you had even mentioned earlier, like on one end there's carnivore and there's vegan. And I've seen vegans that have swung all the way to carnivore. Right. And now seeing some of these carnivore yogis, which I kind of have to laugh about. And there's also people that have been on carnivore and then they've swung over to a vegan diet. And it's just one extreme to the other, right? As opposed to how can we find that middle ground and listening into our body and actually picking up on the cues on what it needs. And oftentimes I think we're outsourcing our own power and we're waiting on someone else to tell us what is best for us, as opposed to, again, listening into those cues and say, what is my body telling me right now?
And understanding that there's wisdom in all of these diets and why they may work. It's just the fact that people aren't asking why. So if you go on a vegan diet and you feel fantastic, ask why. Is it the specific food you're eating? Well, maybe you are including more vegetables in your diet, more fruit in your diet. And yes, people can still eat fruit. But the big thing to me is you have to get to the bottom of the why. So if you go on a carnivore-based diet, because I ask people all the time when I'm working with them, what have you done before that has given you relief from what you're currently dealing with right now? And it's one of the top questions that every practitioner should ask. I don't care if it's pharmaceutical based. If you tell me that you have terrible allergies, but you take Benadryl, 50 milligrams, 5-6 times a day, and you get no relief, well, I'm not looking at a histamine-induced allergy. I'm looking at something else, because I already know that you took Benadryl. And I can give you all the quercetin and vitamin C and stinging nettles in the world, but it's not better. It's not stronger than Benadryl. So I need to approach it from a different avenue. And the same with diet. Like, okay, you can only eat these 4 foods. Well, why do those 4 foods? Why are those okay with you and these aren't? And so I always like to know what gave you relief? And now let's figure out why that may have given you relief. So I get it when people go on a no carb or very low carb diet, or they cut out all vegetables and talk about plant toxins, like that's a bad thing, as if these things are actually all bad, these plant toxins, where they've been shown to reduce colon cancer and many other issues. But besides all of that, is that say, okay, like, again, we don't have to judge. We empathize. This diet's working great for you. And now here's maybe why, so that we can start to move towards center. Because we do know a lot of these, and it always is proven out this way, when you're on an extreme diet, it does not, it increases your goal of what might be reducing bloating, reducing body weight, whatever it might be, but it doesn't increase longevity. That's the issue, is that we're finding is that the actual longevity goes down with a lot of these extremes. And that's the problem. And that ends up catching up with people later, but they don't know how to get out of it, because when they first did the diet, they started to feel great. So they can't realize that a year later, well, now it's actually making them feel worse. And so that's really what I do try to explain to people. And I think, again, having gone through it yourself, you can have a little bit of that empathy as well, because you don't want to judge people. It's part of their journey. So as part of your journey, I would love to hear, like, why did you even choose to become a naturopathic doctor? I mean, how did that enter the equation? Because it's not the popular thing to do. It's becoming much more popular, luckily. But for the most part, the prestige is becoming a medical doctor or a surgeon or a specialist. And obviously you have the intelligence to do any one of those things, but yet you chose to be a naturopathic doctor.
Yeah. So my journey, I was a pre-med student. I studied cell and molecular biology in undergrad, and, really had a bunch of options laid out for me. I set me up well if I wanted to go to medical school. I was in a pre-medical fraternity, and I have a lot of brothers, almost 40 brothers that are in medical school right now. And, some of them are already, residents and have moved on in their professional career. And I've always been somebody that has beat to my own drum. I'm very much individualistic and have my own thoughts on a lot of things too. But, with this newfound passion around nutrition that I developed in undergrad, I did not wholeheartedly believe in the conventional care model that often, disregarded nutrition and a lot of these different lifestyle-based factors. And, a lot of it being on symptom management and symptom suppression, and a lot of time masking symptoms and not actually asking the tougher questions as to why did this develop? And, just kind of band-aiding symptoms. And so it wasn't until I actually met a naturopathic doctor when I was teaching for a nutrition course at UC Santa Barbara that I found out what a naturopathic doctor was. And, it really, cultivated this sense of like, this is my life's purpose. This is what I want to do. Like a healer and an educator that takes into account the individual, treating the whole person, takes a preventative aspect and uses all forms of medicine. This integrative approach, it was like, regardless of what I ended up deciding to do, I wanted to do something that I wholeheartedly believed in and not just following, the beaten path that everyone else has. And so, when I found that out, I basically applied a couple months later and then went to, interview at these different schools. And, one of the aspects of naturopathic medicine and one of the core principles that really resonates with me is the Latin word docere, which means doctor as teacher. And so that education piece is something that I'm very passionate about. And, early in my journey, realizing like, wanting to tell other people what to do and how to take, responsibility for their health, but realizing like that's where you're also going to meet a lot of resistance. And I think we meet a lot of well-intentioned individuals that want to help their family members or loved ones, but oftentimes, maybe that person isn't ready for change. And so the only thing you can do is be a role model and be a model for other people. And I feel like that's kind of this role that I've taken with my social platform for those that want to be here, be entertained and to be educated and, go on this path of growth and better health, follow along. If it's not for you, that's fine. And maybe it's just not the right time, but ultimately, it was kind of just this, I think it was like the sign from the universe that like, this is what it's meant to be. And I think now more than ever, people are seeking more of these root cause answers. And with chronic disease being such an epidemic in this country, I think that's where naturopathic and functional medicine really shines, is asking those tougher questions, looking at the root cause issues and imbalances, and this fundamental realization that is kind of like the cornerstone and keystone of naturopathic medicine, that when you remove the offending obstacles and factors that are perturbing normal physiological function, and you give your body the raw materials, the nutrients, the sleep, the stress reduction, the community, and the exercise, you put your body in this position to heal, because your body has this inherent capacity to self-heal and regenerate. Again, if you remove those offending factors and you give your body what it needs.
You're talking my language. I appreciate that and reinforcing it for everyone out there, because that's really what it is. The doctor is the teacher. And I think that's, and I hope that it continues to go this way. A lot of people that get into the natural field are starting to say, listen, it's not the doctor that is healing you. The doctor is teaching you what to do for your body to heal itself. And much of the healing takes place in a way that we yet don't know. We know how to remove the candida, the SIBO, the H. pylori, the parasites, replace certain prefactors or co-requisites for neurotransmitters, et cetera. But again, in all of the body's innate wisdom, we can only supply it with what it needs and then help to remove whatever those toxicities may be. And so that's a great way to put it, is essentially teaching, right? It's there to teach your clients. And one of the big things you mentioned was not everybody's ready, not at this time. But if they hang around long enough, I love the analogy. If you hang around long enough at the barbershop, you're going to get a haircut. So that's the thing. You might not be ready yet. That's okay. Start to just listen, start to watch the recipes, look at all the different things that people are doing, join those community groups, see what people are doing. And then we have people, 4 years later saying, I'm ready to do my first functional medicine detox. Well, fantastic. Like, that's okay. You waited 4 years. Well, now you can use it for the rest of your life. You're going to understand the process. And the first time is going to be the most challenging. You're going to hit some obstacles. That's okay. That's why you have that community, the people behind you. I'd love to know what did you think going into Naturopathic Medical School? And how is it different 4 years later? What did you think that you would learn, you would see, you would feel? And now you're at the end now. So like, what's the difference? Especially for a lot of people out there right now looking at going to, you're at the National University of Natural Medicine. There's Bastyr, there's Southwest, there's Bridgeport. There's all these great schools. So you're always bright-eyed going in, and what's kind of changed, or maybe it's just reinforced?
Yeah, I would say a lot of things have changed. And, I chose NUNM in Portland for a number of reasons. I mean, Portland, I don't know if you've ever been, is a huge wellness hub, big food scene. I think it rivals, the greater LA area, which a lot of people equate to health and wellness and, just great food scene. So, close access to nature, a lot of community. I think about farmers markets, incredible food scene. And so it was a place that I felt aligned with first and foremost. And NUNM has been the longest standing naturopathic college in the US and in continental North America. So there was a lot of rich history there. And something that was important to me was the clinical experience and making sure that I would be able to see a number of patients in both my third and fourth years. And so that was one of the reasons why I chose NUNM. But I mean, a lot of things have changed. And I think the high cost of continuing education and graduate-based schools has been a limitation to people being interested in pursuing a 4-year degree, not to mention the price tag that comes with a 4-year medical education is pretty daunting. And many people, including myself, take out loans to pay for that. And so, I think there's this greater move to online-based courses and being able to learn anywhere in the world. At first I thought, naturopathic medicine is the medicine of the future. And, as I've gone through school, realizing, like naturopathic medicine, as much as I love the philosophies and the foundations of it and how it gives us such a diverse toolkit to really help people from both, pharmaceuticals, clinical nutrition, homeopathy, hydrotherapy, herbal botanical medicine, and so many other tools, and just building on that toolkit. Unfortunately, in a way, it has become more allopathic. And as I've gone through the training, there is this expectation and desire to be respected by our colleagues and peers, MDs and DOs. And I think because of that, adapting to more standard of care. And unfortunately, and the sad reality is weaning out and teasing out some of the curriculum that we used to learn in the past, such as Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and hydrotherapy and homeopathy, some of these forms of medicine and what we sometimes call nature cure, that were the foundations that made naturopathic medicine what it was. And I went to naturopathic medicine because I wanted to learn that stuff, but are being phased out because they're less evidence-based. And this desire to follow this evidence-based model to seek validation and credibility from our peers. So, at first I thought, I'm going to school for naturopathic medicine, realizing that a lot of it is becoming more standard of care, primary care. We have that ability to be primary care physicians in the state of Oregon, and it is a state-by-state type of jurisdiction based model in terms of how you can practice and what, rules you're held to. But yeah, it kind of ties your hands in a way, which, what I like about naturopathic medicine and what initially brought me there is I could think outside the box. I can employ critical thinking, and I could really search for those root causes. So while I really resonate with the foundations and the principles, now that I'm 3 years in, I'm in my 4th year, I have been a little bit discouraged, and, it's unfortunate. And, my hope is to continue and spread the message of root cause medicine and, safeguarding some of these, teachings and modalities that we've used for centuries. There's a lot of wisdom to, and maybe we don't have all of the, evidence-based medicine to support it, but, I think there is wisdom from anecdotal stories that our ancestors have used. And again, expanding that toolkit and then realizing that the role of the naturopathic doctor is really in an integrative space. So it's not naturopathic or, allopathic. It's really a very integrative role where you have your care team, right? You have an ND or a functional medicine ND. You have your medical doctor, your surgeon, or your chiropractor, or your spiritual energy healer. You have a care team that caters to you and your individual needs. And so that's where I really see naturopathic medical doctors right now. And we'll see where things go in the next couple of years. With everything that is happening with COVID right now too, I know that there has been uncertainty in terms of finances and enrollment. So these are some of the behind the scenes things that I don't think a lot of people talk about. And things are changing. And I think that's the reality is with the changes in our medical care and the need for more primary care physicians, the role of the ND is changing too. And sometimes it's for the betterment, and sometimes I think it can also be our Achilles heel.
I think that was the best analysis and summary of what is happening with naturopathic doctoral schools that I've ever heard. So, and it's great to hear it from you because that's how I see it going. And I'm a little dismayed by that because as a naturopathic doctor, you're not supposed to be looking for any type of validation from medical doctors or DOs. You're supposed to be something different. That's the whole point. If not, become a medical doctor where then you get that highest level that people perceive and then go on to study integrative health or functional medicine. But don't do both, right? I mean, we can't throw out what we know to be true with botanical-based medicine, herbal-based medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, whatever you want to call it. You need to preserve the past. Traditional naturopathy or natural cure, however you want to say it, is what got to where naturopathic doctors are today. And we have the evidence behind it. We don't necessarily spend the same money though, because we don't have a plus trillion dollar pharmaceutical based space. So I'm in complete agreement with you. The biggest difference though, and I've actually mentored many naturopathic doctoral students while in school for their own health and just basically being in the space. And this is going back some time now, but I was absolutely shocked that some schools don't have any residencies or internships for naturopathic doctor schools. Now that may be changing because again, like kind of keeping up with allopathic medicine, but there's obviously a big school in California. People know about it, but it doesn't necessarily have a residency with it. And I found that really strange because like you, I think that the learning can be done online. If you are passionate about a topic, you're going to learn about it. So if there's specific tests, you know the material, great. But I think there still should be as much emphasis on the internships and clinical rounds because you learn so much in the real world that you can't apply in a textbook. It's like learning about music and reading it. Okay, yeah, you can learn a lot and notes and all that, but you need to start to play it to understand how it's done. And I know for me personally, I had all my realizations with saying, oh, this is how it's applied when I began to go through those internships. So I'd love to know what you're interning in now and if you've had some of those same experiences about kind of learning more from being on the job.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great point that you bring up. And that's something that I'm learning being in my second round of rotations. And I'm on 3 different shifts this fall. One is gastroenterology focused. Another one is just general primary care where I just see a bunch of different things. And then the other one is more mental health and psychology focused. And so, I would say my least favorite is the primary care. I just know I don't want to practice primary care and I don't plan on practicing through insurance. I think it limits your ability to fully, practice to the way that you see the world, right? And how you want to practice. I think it kind of strips us a little bit of our ability to create and it kind of puts you in this box. So that I've met with some resistance, but I am loving some of these. I'm doing a mentorship that's in gastroenterology with an ND that has been practicing for over 40 years and practices more, functional medicine. He is, certified through the Institute for Functional Medicine, but also, blends naturopathic with, all forms of integrative medicine and functional medicine. And I'd say that's my most exciting shift that I'm currently on because it really challenges me. And I've been able to see some really complex chronic issues where, again, it comes back to the basis. You remove those offending factors, you give your body what it needs. It doesn't matter if you have an autoimmune condition or if you're, battling, just severe complex chronic illness. Like these people are very, very sick. Like if you kind of come from the aspect of you're treating the person, not the symptoms, and you realize that they are human and you're just treating another person and you give your body, what it needs, remove those factors, you put your body in position to heal. And I've been able to see people overcome, some of these bigger diagnoses such as mast cell activation syndrome, Crohn's and colitis, SIBO, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and, things that, oftentimes you would just be told that you have to be managed on pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life. So, there are definitely highlights, and then there's also areas where I think, I met with resistance, and I think I have to always just kind of turn back and reflect on why am I feeling that way? And, ultimately, what do I want to do? Because, something that I've realized too, and even having this platform that I've developed by kind of starting early and educating is just because I'm becoming a doctor doesn't mean I have to practice in the same way that every doctor does. And for me, I think that was a big aha and sigh of relief because there was this expectation that I had to do what everyone else did, whether that's accept insurance, do primary care, And it's like, ultimately it's up to me. And however I see it, I'm going to make the biggest impact. That's what's most important to me. So, I think just staying open-minded through this journey as I learn more, but even just to go back to your previous question about this need for residency, because residency isn't required for naturopathic doctors in Naturopathic Medical School. And I don't think it will be required until we get licensure in all 50 states, because the way that residents are, residency make money, and it's funded through the federal government in terms of MDs and DOs. And so all of the residency positions for naturopathic doctors are privately funded. So until we get, I think, recognition and licensure in all 50 states, there won't be, federal aid to fund those residency positions. So, while there are residency positions and people may complete a 1 or 2 or 3 year long residency, it's highly competitive because there's not many spaces, because there's not a lot of allocation of money and resources. But yeah, I think that's where you actually experience the most learning, is when you actually are applying everything that you've learned and realizing too, like maybe you have the theory figured out, or you have the intelligence and the knowledge, but just because you may think you understand it, it may not actually, pan out the way that you thought it would when you're working with someone in a clinical practice one-on-one.
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. And I think of it like this. Okay, there's this diet that should work. There's these herbal supplements or nutritional supplements that should work. And they do work, like let's say 8 out of 10 times. But the learning happens with the 2 people that it doesn't work for out of the 10. And then what do? I mean, you just had this plan, and now your plan's out the window because during your follow-ups, they're feeling worse, or they're having a greater exaggeration of symptoms. And you need to then go back and question what you learned. It doesn't mean that it's all wrong. It just means that there's another side of this story, and for this individual, and what's their deeper why. And so that's really, obviously, as you know, and our community knows, we teach these principles through the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute. But if there was ever a way that these students could then also intern, that really to me is kind of that next level. And that's difficult because there's HIPAA compliance, there's laws around this, there's they're not doctoral students. So, it's a little challenging there, but that's why we do a lot of case studies. We do different things like that. But I love to hear people's experiences with that, because it also shapes how you feel you will be practicing. And you've already learned that you don't want to be primary care. You don't want to accept insurance, because I know when Massachusetts went towards insurance and licensing NDs in 2016, everything changed. And that's because you had to do a full exam. You had to keep electronic medical records. You need all of these different things. It was just a game changer. So some people decided to get licensed and some didn't. But it changed how they were able to then practice. Because if you're taking insurance, you only can do a certain allocated number of hours with each individual. And is that what's best for the patient? I mean, that's really what you have to ask yourself. Am I doing right now what is best from the other human, as you stated, across from me? Because if it's not, that's not the ideal way to practice medicine, in my opinion. And that's why I'd also rather leave the allopathic and conventional medicine to a medical doctor and allow a naturopathic doctor or a naturopath or an integrative health practitioner to practice in a more natural way. That's how I see it. It's only my opinion, because I know that many of the naturopathic doctors coming out of school right now can be primary care physicians, but they do have to ask themselves, do I want to use pharmaceuticals and do I want to use this? It's a really, if you allow yourself to do that, it's a trickier road. And there's, of course, a time and place for pharmaceuticals. So don't get me wrong. I'm not someone that believes there's never a time and place. There is, especially in acute-based issues, or when symptoms are so bad, you need to palliate them at least until you can begin to get the body closer to homeostasis. But that was just basically a long rant, but any thoughts specifically on that? And then I'd love to hear too more about, based on what you've learned, based on your internships right now, the mentors that you've met, what do you plan on specializing, if anything?
Yeah. So I guess just to answer that last question, because it's on the top of my head, is I am taking more of a gastroenterology focus. I think gut health is central to our health at large. And you think about, how it affects our hormones, how it affects our ability to detoxify and excrete xenobiotics and other matter that have, built up in what we're exposed to in our environment. You think about, dermatology, you think about autoimmune conditions, and mental health issues. I mean, it all comes back to and related to the gut and metabolism and digestion. And so, something as fundamental as eating and what we're putting into our body, and then our ability to digest, break down, absorb, and assimilate those nutrients is foundational. And I think that's something that really interests me. And I think you can really move the needle when you address gut-based issues. And I think in any comprehensive protocol or plan that you have for any individual, especially with complex chronic illness, there's some aspect that is related to healing and sealing the gut, or addressing if there is gut dysbiosis, or if there is some type of pathogens, whether that's parasites or candida or SIBO, or H. pylori, creating the optimal terrain and creating this environment for the body to heal. So gut focus is kind of what I'm thinking and how it relates to complex chronic disease, autoimmune, dermatology, endocrinology. I used to do clinical research too, but prior to getting into school, and I was in the field of type 1 diabetics and the development of an artificial pancreas system, and which is more of like an automated insulin delivery system. So endocrinology, hormones is really fascinating to me, and how it relates to metabolism. So, those are kind of like my feelers right now. Also being an athlete, wanting to work with individuals and athletes that are kind of at the top of their game and how they can optimize their health. And again, wanting to work more in healthcare as opposed to sick care. And again, how you can optimize the terrain, optimize the body, exceed athletic potential. These are all areas that interest me, as well as longevity, regenerative medicine. I mean, stem cells are super interesting to me, PRP, prolotherapy, ozone, peptides. I mean, there's so much that interests me. I think it's just kind of, sifting through what is it exactly that I want to do. But I do know that I think my role is going to be more of an educational capacity, and then the people that I do work with is going to be more limited. I will say that it takes a lot of time and energy to work with people one-on-one too. And so just kind of, something that I would say the most important thing to me is autonomy, and being able to have my own schedule on my own terms at my own time. And so, I feel like by going through this process, and one of the reasons why I went to naturopathic medicine is wanting that autonomy and freedom to create the, lifestyle by design type of thing. And so, really I've set myself up well for that. And I just think over this next year, it's just getting more clear on, what is this next chapter going to look like for me, and what materials or courses or resources do I want to create, and what is my bigger purpose and why? And, again, wanting to work and serve through a place of creativity, as opposed to, this day-to-day manual labor that I think a lot of us are caught up in. And so, those are just things that I was reflecting on that are important to me, and being able to create that work-life balance that is desirable for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think no better time with what we're learning right now with telemedicine and telecoaching and being able to work with people anywhere in the world. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable that we're able to get people products or labs or education virtually anywhere. And that's the nice thing I really think about social media. There's a lot not so great about it, but there's also a lot, and that's free resources, free education. And a lot of that you put out on a daily basis, so people can begin to learn and take those specific steps. And then when they're ready, then they can start to dive deeper into the specific protocols as well, which I think is fantastic. And again, like you said, you've already set yourself up to be in that position to be able to choose. And the other thing, because you mentioned a few things, and sometimes people would say, well, like you're talking about stem cells and artificial pancreas. I actually believe that is integrative health. And I do believe that's actually naturopathic in nature, because what you're doing is you're helping the body to work better on its own, how it was supposed to. And whether type 1 diabetes, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Is it autoimmune? Is it caused by virus? Is there some factor there that those alpha cells in the pancreas itself isn't working as well as it should or could or is not anymore? Well, what if we could give it back its potential? What if we could grow a new pancreas? What if we could grow new cells? Or what if we could actually allow the body through some type of artificial intelligence to know when to produce the right amount of insulin at what time? I actually believe that is naturopathic, and that is natural in nature, is giving the body its own resources to do what it's supposed to do. But let me know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes back to this hierarchy of the therapeutic order that we learn in naturopathic medicine that dictates and guides, the level of intervention that we employ when it comes to treating an individual, with the base being kind of creating and establishing the foundations to health, and then stimulating the vis medicatrix naturalis, which is the self-healing process, and then going up to tonifying weakened and damaged organ systems, and then kind of going higher up in that ladder, employing herbal, botanical drugs, or should I say herbs that, can definitely move the needle in terms of therapeutic potential, but can also have some side effects depending on, what other comorbid conditions that person has, what medications they're on, and, how much of that drug they are on, and just like, what is the state of that person's organ system? You think about the liver, you think about the kidney, and these different emunctories, which are these organs of excretion that have to actually eliminate everything that's coming into the system as well. So again, how to support and tonify those weakened organ systems. And then as you move up to, you think about supplementation and nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, and then surgery, which is kind of like that last intervention that is a little bit more invasive. And, with the artificial pancreas thing, I do see it as kind of being that at the level of supporting weakened organ systems, the pancreas being one of those. And while this is more artificial intelligence, it helps those that otherwise have dysglycemia and poor blood sugar control better achieve euglycemia, or normal blood sugar, because we know that by having hyperglycemia and dysregulated blood sugar, that it leads to a whole host of issues: thyroid disorder or thyroid dysfunction. It can lead to imbalances in sex hormones. It also can create more of this pro-inflammatory environment and set you up for more comorbid conditions. It can also, with diabetes, can lead to diabetic retinopathy, peripheral neuropathy. It can lead to nephropathy, so kidney damage. It can lead to increased risk for cardiovascular disease. So you really want to prevent that, right? And how is it that you can get your body back into the state of homeostasis? But, to go back to the autoimmune question, I mean, right now it's more theory of like, can you actually reverse autoimmune disease? And when you're putting it into remission, what's happening? And I always like to phrase this question as like, what is happening with an autoimmune condition? So with autoimmune disease, there is immune dysregulation as opposed to a hypervigilant immune response. Like, yes, but there's more immune dysregulation. And a lot of that is because we have loss of tolerance, and we have both central and peripheral tolerance as part of the immune system. Central tolerance being in the thymus gland, and peripheral being these T regulatory cells. And when we lose tolerance, we have more, again, immune dysregulation. We see things such as more food sensitivities, food intolerances, more, the development of autoimmune conditions. You have digestive issues, skin rashes, a lot more of these systemic type of reactions because there's this breach in intestinal permeability. We know that the gut health is intimately tied to our immune health because of the association with the role that, the postbiotics, or these short chain fatty acids that are byproducts of carbohydrate or fermentable fiber metabolism, our bacteria, how that communicates with our gut associated lymphoid tissue, which is why everyone talks about how 70 to 80% of our immune system relies on our gut. What they're referring to is that lymphoid tissue that resides under that single layer of cells that line the digestive tract. So if we think about why have we lost immune tolerance and how can we restore tolerance, I think a lot of it comes back to gut health, and how that gut health is central to both our immune health and restoring immune homeostasis, as well as metabolic health. And then also looking at what is the genetic predisposition, because yes, there is a genetic predisposition where people may be predisposed to, maybe Hashimoto's or type 1 diabetes or psoriasis, Crohn's or colitis, but you also have that prerequisite of intestinal permeability or leaky gut, what we call. Also thinking about that total toxic burden on the body, or that metaphorical rain barrel that you talk about. And then that triggering event is kind of that fourth pillar too. So you talk about like viruses, and we're starting to study this seasonal pattern to diagnoses of, let's say, type 1 diabetes, and the onset of, infections such as viruses. That is kind of like the camel that breaks, or the straw that breaks the camel's back. But it's kind of this perfect storm where you have the genetic predisposition, you have the intestinal permeability, you have all these factors that have kind of metaphorically filled up this rain barrel in terms of the stress, environmental toxins, pathogens, gut dysbiosis, and then you have either, acute food poisoning, you have some type of emotional stress or trauma in your life. Maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's an infection, maybe it's the insertion of a foreign object such as an implant or, some type of surgery, breast implants, that for that person, based on that allostatic load is that triggering event, and it turns that immune system to this more dysregulated aspect. And so in kind of approaching that, it's, well, we have control of the intestinal permeability aspect and what contributes to that, as well as the rain barrel effect and, all those different factors that contribute to the total toxic load, and how you can lessen that. And by lessening that, you're going to allow the immune system to come back to the state of homeostasis and reduce that, dysregulated immune response that is reacting. It's not messing up. It's reacting in a way that is appropriate to the environment and the terrain. So by cleaning up the terrain and thinking about the terrain-based theory, I think there can be significant healing that people can experience through that.
Without a doubt. And I think that was well explained. And for anybody with an autoimmune issue out there, you'll also hear what Tyler said is it's not specific to that particular issue. Now, there are nuances for psoriasis, there are nuances for Crohn's, nuances for rheumatoid arthritis and thyroid Hashimoto's, because halogen-based groups can affect more of the thyroid. Like, there's all sorts of different nuances, but it goes back to the gut, it goes back to stress, it goes back to the balance of the immune system. And your genetics matters at the point only when you've really gone into an imbalanced state. That's why, for me, it's semantics. Whether it's in remission or gone doesn't really matter to me. It's just no longer there. And it's because your body's back in a state of homeostasis. Now, could you go back to that position? Absolutely. I had rheumatoid arthritis. I had all sorts of issues. I had POTS. I had type 2 diabetes. My body could go back there, but I would have to allow it to. So I'm not scared that I might be coming out of remission anytime soon. It's been over 2 decades. So the only way we go back is if we allow those patterns to come again. And sometimes they do. Again, like, it could happen because, there was a traumatic event in your life, and then your food started to go, and then you took up alcohol. Like, there are reasons why these things happen, but those can be corrected. And so I believe that autoimmune issues absolutely can be healed. We see it all the time in our practice, and I'm sure you see it all the time in yours and internships as well. What I look to and then I completely agree, and I want to get into foundationals towards the end right now, because there are foundations that we do have to follow. Like, there is foundational nutrition, which I would like to talk about. But the reason why I like the stem cells, potentially, as long as we use it in an ethical fashion, and the artificial intelligence, is because if you have rheumatoid arthritis and you let it go too long and it disfigured your joints, or you had Hashimoto's and it began to destroy the thyroid, or you had type 1 diabetes and it's destroyed part of the pancreas, well, maybe we can repair those through stem cell or something else. And so that's where I look at that. Like, you always have to correct the body, but you might not be able to uncorrect the damage. I've seen the pain go away with RA, but I haven't seen those knuckles return to normal. But maybe you have, but I just haven't seen it with myself or a lot of my colleagues. But with the potential of rebuilding, I think we have the potential, and I only think it's 20, 30 years away maximum. So let me hear your thoughts on that, and then I'm going to move over to the foundation for healthy living through diet, instead of having to find, a random specific diet that'll work for a couple months.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really excites me, actually, the field of stem cells. And I think it's also important that not all stem cells are created equal. So, that's a different discussion. And so I think there's a lot of nuance to it when you're looking at the literature, what type of stem cells are being used. But also, so for those who are not familiar with what stem cells are, these are naive cells that basically can give rise to any different cell type in the body, whether that's fibroblasts or cardiomyocytes or, any type of cell in the body. Those stem cells are receiving cues from your environment. And you can think about it, if you're familiar with, like, a lot of people do culture-based medium work in laboratory settings. That culture and medium is information that influences the differentiation of these cells into these mature cell types. And so your blood, in a way, is that medium, that culture medium that influences those cells and tells them to develop and respond into certain types of cells based on that terrain and that environment. So the thing with the stem cells, why I think there's a ton of therapeutic potential, I always question that if we never actually change the terrain and we're just injecting in these new stem cells, they're still likely receiving the same input from that environment until you clean up the muddy waters or that environment, that while it may rescue something such as like vision loss, and you just, differentiate, stem cells into retinal pigmented epithelial cells, transplant them in the back of the eye, and someone restores their vision, how long will that actually last to the point where their vision starts to atrophy again? Because again, if you don't change the environment, change the terrain, and a lot of these foundational based pillars that we'll talk about when it comes to health, I think there's a time point. And again, this is a very, it's not a cheap intervention, let's say, right? It's expensive. So I love the potential of stem cells and the ability to regenerate and give other solutions, right? I think it continues to expand that toolkit that we have and what we can do, and push the boundaries of medicine, longevity, and even just our understanding of how the body works. But I do see that there are potential limitations if we're not addressing, again, the foundational pillars to health and how that terrain is influencing the fate of every cell.
Without a doubt. And just like diet, which we'll move into now, you can be eating a anabolic diet and it could be absolutely rebuilding your muscles, your joints, your ligaments, your hair, your skin, but it can also be helping cancer cells to grow as well because of increased IGF-1, et cetera. So I believe the same potential exists with stem cells because of those naive cells. But again, the more testing needs to be done. I don't think that you want to be the first group of people to do this, but just like you were saying, if your body is healthy though, then most likely this is going to increase health. If your body is not healthy, yeah, you might get that temporary relief, but then also here's what else it's creating. And so I think we do have to be careful. A lot more needs to be studied. I think we're 20, 30 years away. I would love that to be faster through, specific AI-based learning, which I'm a fan of, an advocate of, as long as there's a human being able to extrapolate that data and use it with real people in the real world. But let's get into foundational-based nutrition. Now, again, I don't know if you're a proponent of keto, of carnivore, of predominantly plant-based. I actually know what you're a fan of, but I don't know about the other ones specifically. And what I would say is, again, like there's a time and place for everything, and it gives you the ability to learn about yourself, what works, what doesn't work, and maybe why. But where do you feel the foundation is? Like if people could just say, I'm going to cut through my 5 years of experimentation, where should I end up at? I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think one of those foundational principles that I think all people can apply, and where to start for anyone that is confused, because unfortunately nutrition has gotten so dogmatic, and it's like whether you're keto or paleo or carnivore or vegan, right? Like I have no dog in the race. And I think bioindividuality trumps all, and listening to your body and how it responds to different foods. And I think honoring that, but really just getting back to the basics in terms of prioritizing wholesome, nutrient-dense, unadulterated foods. Thinking about how you can incorporate more color into your diet, and no, not in the means of Skittles, but incorporating more of these phytochemicals, which are these biologically active compounds that contain polyphenols and antioxidants that are found in brightly colored fruits, vegetables, and a lot of these plant-based foods that have favorable benefits to our physiology. And so thinking about how you can increase diversity of foods and increase the tolerability of foods, because oftentimes, I'll talk to people where they're on a super limited diet, whether that's they have gut-based issues and they have to follow a low FODMAP diet, or they have histamine issues and they have to follow a low histamine diet, or even thinking about like an autoimmune paleo diet for people with autoimmune disease, or carnivore. Again, very restrictive diets, and they're removing a lot of things. Ultimately, I think our goal as humans is, how can we increase tolerability to all these foods? Granted, you may be in a heal state currently, and you need to identify and remove some of these triggering foods for a period of time until you can heal whatever that underlying root cause is. Then when you're in a phase of optimization as opposed to healing, your body's going to be more adaptive to different types of foods, and it's going to be able to tolerate those things too. So I think the important question is, again, why have we lost the tolerance and ability to digest these foods, or, how they become incompatible with our body? Like a lot of times when I think about food sensitivities, especially if people have there's a patient that I saw on shift the other week, they had 33 food sensitivities, including the things like ginger and turmeric, which we know are super healthy, anti-inflammatory, and modulate, hundreds of different pathways that, favor, good health. So for that individual, what that tells me is, that there's intestinal permeability, that there's something going on in the gut that we need to heal and seal the gut up. And when we address the gut, that they should be able to restore tolerance to those foods. And so, I think that's the ultimate goal, is how can we improve tolerance instead of eating a very restrictive diet, but also acknowledging that some of us are in a healing phase and some of us are in a health optimization phase. And depending on where we're at, we have to be either more strict or you can be more lenient in terms of our dietary guidelines and what we follow. But ultimately, I think the foundations lies around whole, unadulterated foods, celebrating, a lot of plant diversity, and thinking about nutrient density first and foremost.
And so when you're looking at building, let's say, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, are you trying to say, well, we want to eat a rainbow throughout the entire day? So are you trying to say, okay, we're going to do you believe in the 7 to 9 cups of fruits and vegetables every day? Are you trying to get 2 to 3 cups with every meal, along with the phytonutrients, the fiber, all that comes along with it? Or are you first building around a protein? What does the meal building scenario look like for you?
For me personally, I'll break it up because there's me personally, and then I think about like the patient, the new patient that is maybe on this food journey and they want to eat more healthfully. So for that individual, I think you have to meet the individual where they're at and the patient where they're at. And for that person, if they, don't eat any vegetables in their diet and all of a sudden I'm going to go vegan the next day, they may get a ton of rebounding gas, bloating, and maybe even constipation because their body isn't used to all that fiber. So I think it needs to be something like gradually and slowly, depending on where that person's at. But I think any movement to where you're cooking more meals at home or you're incorporating more whole foods, that is a win and that is a step in the right direction. And I think acknowledging that with any change and transition, there's going to be challenges and you just have to be persistent and consistent. And I think that's going to build confidence and long-term wins. For me personally, I don't necessarily abide by any, guidelines in terms of like how much fruits, vegetables, protein that I'm supposed to be consuming. And I don't track macronutrients. If anything, I look at micronutrients. And I don't track calories. I think if you're focusing on whole nutrient dense foods, you're going to be full and satisfied, because it's going to influence different, neuroendocrine chemistry that is going to tell and send signals from your gut to your brain that you're full and you're going to feel satiated because of a lot of the plant matter, the fiber, the quality protein, and high quality fat, which is going to slow gastric emptying and all these different physiology things that we don't have to go into. But when you focus on, I see it with each meal, if you're kind of looking for guidelines, kind of like greens, fiber, lean protein, and quality fat. Those are kind of like my 4 pillars that I try to make sure that I'm meeting at every meal, but also, listening into your body, because it's something that you even brought up earlier in this conversation that, I have typically done smoothies for breakfast every morning for the last 4 years almost. And I really like smoothies. My body does well with them. But also starting to transition more out of that smoothie and the breakfast in terms of the breakfast option and just like, eating more with the seasons. And like sometimes, smoothies they're colder, they're pre-digested, they can be great. Very convenient for me being a student that just wants to throw something in a cup and, grab and go type of thing, but still ensuring nutrient density. But now that I have more time and maybe it's the winter, like focusing on more warm, nourishing, grounding foods when, you think about the changes of the season and how it can upheave a lot of things too. And so you think about warm root vegetables and bone broths and eggs and, dark leafy greens that I think can be, it changes. There's variability. So I think listening to your body, but I think that's the biggest piece, listening to your body. What does it need? I don't really follow any type of, necessary like dogmatic diet or any strict rules, but eat almost intuitively and try to listen to my body, what it needs, and realizing that what worked for me in the past may not be currently working for me, and kind of just always adapting as I learn more and listening into what my body needs.
And so, it sounds like you're getting your veggies at every meal. You're getting a protein at every meal, lean protein, whether it be plant-based or paleo, we'll call that fish, meat, etc. And you're getting a high quality fat. Those fats could be probably avocado, olives, maybe some nuts, things like that. What about for you? And again, like total agreement. And if you're eating a rainbow, well, there's reds, orange, yellows. We've got blues and purples. We've got our greens and we've got our whites. So I like to give people those examples. You're probably getting, if you're trying to eat 2 at each meal, about 6 cups minimum per day, and like you said, maybe eat a little bit more of this, maybe you're eating a little bit of less of that. But when you're looking at examples, you're saying, okay, maybe a handful of protein. I'm a little hungrier because I did a bigger workout. Okay, maybe I'm going to eat a little bit more protein. Totally agree with that. And let's talk about for you personally, what about starches? Do you eat any grains right now? Do you stick mainly to root-based vegetables? What do you like for yourself as to where you're at?
Sure. I do. I'm a bigger fan of starches as opposed to grains. I don't do many grains, but I'm not grain free. I will have some sprouted quinoa and rice at times, but it's not something that I personally purchase. And if I am going to eat it, it's more, if I'm out type of thing. I will do sprouted and soaked lentils. I like to do a good lentil dal. I mean, it's just really rich in prebiotic fibers, and it kind of just gives a little bit more diversity, and my body responds well to it. But generally, I'm doing more of the sweet potatoes. I'm doing plantains. I'm doing parsnips. I'm doing yucca. And the squashes, especially this time of year. But I have noticed, because I've played around with like low carb in the past, and my body does better with carbohydrates as opposed to following a strict low carbohydrate diet. And with any of these diets, whether it's keto, low carb, paleo, carnivore, vegetarian, vegan, I do see, there's truth in all of these. And, whether that's half truths or kind of figuring out like what is the piece that's true for you, I see a lot of these as tools to kind of integrate and find out what is the best diet for you and how your body responds. And I know that's probably not the answer that people want, because people kind of want, specific direction. But for me personally, don't do a lot of grains. But if I were to be more active, I mean, this time last year, I ran a half marathon and I was training for a half marathon. So I was increasing the amount of carbohydrates that I was consuming. So also just, what is the demand that my body needs? And am I more in this, anabolic or catabolic based phase? Am I trying to lose weight? Am I trying to put on lean muscle mass? I think that's all going to dictate how much carbohydrates that I am consuming. But I will say that the common denominator, regardless of how much carbohydrates I'm consuming, it's coming from whole foods. So not eating refined grains and refined sugars that are going to really, jack up your blood sugar and insulin and, create more of this picture of metabolic dysfunction, at least long-term, in those that are more predisposed.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that's the one variable that changes in our nutrition programs when someone has already repaired their gut, gone through something like our CBO protocol, et cetera, is that you're gauging your starch intake, mainly root-based vegetables, based and fruit, based on your activity level, your hormonal balance, et cetera. And my philosophy is that if you're not able to eat 50 to 75 grams of carbohydrates per day, there's an imbalance in your body. If your body can't tolerate carbohydrates, there's something wrong at a cellular level, a hormonal level. There is something off. And so when people say, I tried introducing, because we will go, and like a lot of people don't know this, we actually, before keto was popular, we were doing more of a keto-based diet, but only for 21 days because there's a resetting period of time. But if you reintroduce 1 cup of berries and all of a sudden you gain 3 to 5 pounds, that's a problem. Like that, your body should be able to tolerate that. So I don't like when I hear people say, oh, I started a keto diet and now I only need to eat 900 calories a day. And I say, that's not a good thing. You've essentially lowered your metabolic rate, maybe 50%. Like that doesn't make you healthier. That means that the slightest deviation, and because metabolism is not just about weight loss, your body can't tolerate that. So I get a little frightened for that. And so that's why I like people to end up where you're at right now. It's gauging, well, the good quality whole foods. It's being able to, and I have a podcast coming out, or probably already has come out by now, on Ayurvedic foods for the fall. So you're beginning to incorporate that. Again, I'm a smoothie all year round. I just change the herbs that go into it, and I have warm oatmeal with it. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if people want to do a porridge and oatmeal, or I get a lot of those sweet potatoes or root vegetables, maybe even with a little bit of ghee, then great. Like that's a nice fall-based food. So I like how you put that. And I think that self-experimentation is what eventually is the fun part. So first you get the body, you fix the body, you get it stable, and then you can start to add in these different variables. If you add too many in at the same time, though, it can be a little bit of a disaster because you don't necessarily know what worked and what didn't work. Before I let you go here today, I want to know, because obviously such a deep background in nutrition and cooking and recipes and gut healing, what are some naturopathic medical textbooks that you could share with my community? So regular books that you like, that they could learn more about bioindividuality, their health, or whatever. What are some of your favorites that you could just share? Because my community, I think they love to read and they listen to it on audio or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I think a simple one for places to start in kind of like food principles that is a very easy read, very approachable, is Food Rules by Michael Pollan. Mm-hmm. I really like his approach, and I think he often quotes it as eat mostly plants, not too much. And it kind of talks about the diversity aspect. I know I butchered that quote.
No, sorry. You just missed mostly green. Yeah.
Mostly green. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like his book. I did learn a lot about individual foods and how people respond to foods in Mark Hyman's book, Food, What the Heck Do I Eat? I thought it was a really good introductory book for a lot of people that want more advanced nutrition knowledge, and kind of goes into more detail and nuances around nutrition and how people are responding. The other book that I learned, and I would say it opened my eyes a little bit more to the paleo approach and incorporating the benefits of incorporating more animal-based products and not being as afraid to them, was Genius Foods by Max Lugavere. And he is a journalist. And I just really appreciate, especially all of the literature that he cited in that. And I thought it was well received on my end. So, I mean, those are 3 books that I would recommend as a place to start. And then I've learned a ton through podcasts too. School, one of our big tools is clinical nutrition. We get about 140 hours in clinical nutrition training, which is quite different than the 20 some hours that allopathic physicians get in medical school. So that's one of our things that is more of our bread and butter, is understand, not only how nutrition impacts metabolism and our overall health, but how nutrition needs to be individualized, right? And while we may desire to create, protocols at large for people to follow, it can be a little bit slippery too, because, a good example is eggs. Eggs for some people can be a superfood, super nutrient dense, and for other people, they're definitely allergic to it. And so I think that's where you got to kind of find that balance. But, kind of what is that middle ground is whole foods that, I keep reiterating the whole time, and how we can consume less of the hyper palatable processed packaged food on a daily basis that contains a lot of these refined sugars and grains and food stabilizers and additives that honestly we don't know enough about. Like, we have animal-based studies looking at, what these potential additives may do to our health, but we're learning more and more. And, I think the thing that's really starting to pique my interest, and I'm excited to learn more, is how, whether it's medications that we like, pharmaceutical medications, or even these food additives, how they impact the gut microbiome in particular. And as we learn more and more about the gut microbiome, it being such a central role to our overall health, physiology, and metabolism.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree as well. And just like pharmaceuticals, those preservatives and other additives are never tested with each other. And, that's a huge issue as well. How do we know when these two combine what they create in the body? And especially with the amount of mental health-based issues as well as child-based learning issues, I think that's a very important next field to look into. Thank you so much for being on the show here today. I know I could go on and on talking with you about all sorts of different topics, the different dogmas, the different theories out there, but maybe we'll save that for another time. So once again, thank you so much. Where can people connect with you online and your website as well?
Yeah, so I spend most of my time on Instagram at functional.foods. I post content probably 3 to 4 days a week, and you're going to find a lot of stuff on food. You're going to find recipes, a lot of knowledge on just kind of more holistic health and wellness. And I have a website, tylerjean.com. I have blog posts and I have resources. I also have an anti-inflammatory recipe e-cookbook for those that are looking to on this journey to incorporate more whole, nutrient-dense food that it kind of takes the best of a vegan and paleo lifestyle, but it removes a lot of those more common inflammatory, allergenic foods, but also, marries the aspect of, comfort and, food tasting good, right? There's more to food than just the nourishment, and food should taste good. There's a community around it. So that was kind of the intention with that. So you can find that and other resources on my website.
Excellent. Any parting words for our community?
I think my parting words would be that we're all on our own journey. Don't compare yourself to, maybe where I'm at or where you're at. Like what I have expressed to all of you, or if you go and look at my page, that is 8 years of work, and it's been a journey for me. So just know we're all on our own journey. And I think acknowledging that we're all doing the best that we can with the knowledge that we have, and with that newfound knowledge, how we can integrate that into our day-to-day life.
That's well put. Thank you so much again for being on the show.
Thanks, Dr. Cabral. Appreciate it.